Welcome to the Wise Women Collective Show.
Join hosts Lin Schussler-Williams, Holly Hartman, and Brooke Haynes with their inspiring guests for conversations that fuel personal growth, career success, and community impact.
Tune in to connect and amplify your power, because when women rise, the world follows.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wise Women Collective Radio. I'm Lin Schussler-Williams, and I'm welcoming my co-hosts Holly Hartman and Brooke Haynes and our amazing guest, Melanie Brummer. I'm so excited to have Melanie with us today. You guys, this is an amazing treat because Melanie has so many gifts and so many things to teach us and so many things to talk about. I'm super excited about the things we're going to discuss. So, Melanie, I know that you have roles in your business, community leader, but there's a mission behind all of it that I want us to kind of start with, just so people have some frame of reference for your work in the world. So tell everybody who you are and where you are, because for a lot of our audience, that will be super interesting too. And then something about the mission of your work.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for this amazing opportunity to talk to your networks. My name is Melanie Brummer, and I'm the founder of the Upcycled Cloth Collective, which is a Facebook community that is encouraging people to reuse their textiles, one inspiring idea at a time. And our hope is to reduce textile waste in the landfill by creating a positive conversation around what textile reuse looks like. And also just reframing it for people, because some people think that, if you're making something out of a used textile, that it's then going to look like it possibly came out of the garbage bin. And our community really, really showcases the fact that very, very, very beautiful artworks, garments, homeware can be created from very old resources, and that they can be reinvented to have a whole other new life beyond the obvious. So that's what we do. Having grown up in Africa, I'm in South Africa. Having grown up in Africa, where we've become kind of the dumping ground for textile waste from the global West. We've got landfill sites that can be seen from outer space. If you go to places like Ghana, the clothing washes up on the beaches because there's so much of it. There's more of it being exported to Africa than Africans can use. And knowing that this is happening to my continent makes me very, very invested in our cause, and fills me with a sense of responsibility that this is my time and my work to do, and that the work goes beyond just me, just my ideas and just my needs, and into an environmental and a social space that goes way beyond me.
Yeah, that's so important for us to understand, Melanie, I think, because most of us don't have that experience of walking to a beach and having clothing wash up on the shore, right? We haven't been to that, experience. And yes. So I think it's important for us to know why this is so important in the big picture for all of us, right? Because the clothing that's washing up on those African beaches didn't start out on the African continent, I betcha. Right. No. And right. So it's important for all of us to understand how we contribute to that. And Melanie has certainly been an inspiration to me. Just yesterday, I saved a shirt that had been my brother's that wasn't going to go in the landfill so I could make some things out of it. And I would never have done that if it weren't for you, Melanie, for sure.
It's amazing to hear. It's amazing to hear that we're able to show people how to fit textile upcycling into their daily lives.
Yes.
Because a lot of people look at this whole environmental thing and go, this is too big for me. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. What can I do? I can't do anything. And the Cloth Collective actually shows you that there's a lot that you can do. And it's one tiny choice at a time, you know, and you really just slot it into everything else you're doing in your day. It's not like you have to go and do something extra or invent something new. You're just more mindful. You make more mindful choices with what's already there.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what am I going to do with that shirt this morning while I was getting ready. I was like, what am I going to make with that shirt? And then I thought another thing you inspired was Brooke Haynes was helping a friend clear out some things out of her house, and there were 2 rolls of upholstery fabric, and Brooke said, I think I know somebody who'd like those, and she brought them to me. And then today, when I was thinking about my brother's shirt and what can I do to use that and maybe make some things that are little gifts for his, you know, grandchildren and nieces and nephews and things, I thought, well, I don't really know how to do that very well, but I could use that upholstery fabric that Brooke brought me to start, like, make templates and try it out before I'm using the precious. So, yeah, it's like you've inspired a whole spiral, Melanie, in my life. And that's just my little tiny thing, right? So it's so wonderful. Well, Melanie, I know that you didn't start your career being a clothing upcycler. And I'm tempted whether to ask you to go down the role of what your career has been, how you got here, or maybe first we need to talk about, like, what is this Upcycled Collective? You know, where does it live? How did you grow it? What does it look like? I know there's a magazine. Like, let's start there and then we'll get back to, like, what else there was. Yeah.
So I actually think that we should put it in that order because
good.
The chronological narrative actually informs how I ended up where I am.
Okay, great.
So in the 1990s, when I left school, I tried working for a while, but it didn't work out very well for me. And one day when I was 23, I made a very bold statement. I said to everyone, I'm going to be self-employed and I'm going to start a business making tie-dyed T-shirts, much to the horror of my family. We were like, this is never going to work. Because South Africa is quite a conservative environment, and it was a very, very, very niche market. Needless to say, I pig-headedly made a success of it for some years and sold at several markets around Johannesburg and Pretoria for some time, and grew my stock holding and sold thousands of T-shirts and bell-bottom pants to friends and family and everybody in Johannesburg. My business model wasn't very sound, though. It was based on me throwing myself into the gap. So if there was any kind of a shortfall or an error or an assumption that came along to bite me later, I would absorb it. And it normally involved me working longer and longer hours. So eventually I did burn out. And then I went into a period of kind of rest and recuperation. And when I came back out of that, I then had to pivot the business. And I decided that instead of purchasing stock and holding it, which was quite a heavy way of running a business, I would reinvent the business and I would sell my finishes to the fashion industry. So I worked almost like a dry cleaner, where fashion designers would then bring me their garments and their fabrics, and I would transform them with color using dyes and handmade prints. So I was using the lino prints also. And in that way, I would transform their garments. And I spent a decade working into the fashion industry for fashion designers like Marianne Fazler, Stone Cherry, Black Coffee. These are South African designers that you may not know of, but in my world, they were very, very big. In 2005, I had finishes in 5 collections on the catwalk at SA Fashion Week. which was quite a big deal for me back then. But then I also kind of churned my way through the fashion industry and decided I wanted to pivot again. And then decided to become a traveling craft teacher. And I drove around South Africa in a little car, in a little entry-level car. And also when people were telling me, you can't do this, South Africa is such a dangerous place. You can't drive around. You're going to be killed. I drove around the country, I think, 20 times in 6 years. And to give you an idea of the rate of churn that I had, I was on the road in 2014 for 32 weeks of the year. So I was on the road more than I was at home. And I taught all around the country in fashion colleges, craft shops, skills development centers, broad range, broad spectrum. I went everywhere from the people who couldn't afford me to those who could, and taught everywhere in between. And then again, I got to the end of that cycle and I was like, okay, I'm burned out for this kind of work. I need to pivot again. And I again made a very bold statement that I was going to start a digital business, and I was going to become an international brand, and I was going to use Facebook to do it. So that was kind of the framework that I built for myself. And then I went for it. And then along the way, so at this point, inflection point in time, I was selling craft kits to a South African market. So it was a little tie-dye kit that came in a plastic container, a little plastic bucket that you could then take the instructions and go and make yourself some stuff. And I was teaching, and I was hoping to pivot into teaching internationally. So then along the way, I moved in with my partner, Pete, and he had a stash of fabrics that were left over from his mother's deceased estate. She'd been passed for a couple of years. And he had these fabrics that he just did not have the heart to deal with. He didn't know what to do with them. They were everywhere. They were in all different states of, like they had rat droppings on, and like they'd been everywhere in the house, from the garage to the drawers and under a sewing machine, and in all various states of disrepair. And I took them all and I washed them and folded them and put them together and looked at them and went, okay, now what am I going to do with this? What is the most that I could do with this collection of fabrics? So I went on Facebook and I said, in some of the Facebook groups about textiles, I said, what if I was to do this thing? I have this idea. I want to print these fabrics and I'm going to send them out to random makers around the world and invite them to transform them into a finished item. And then we co-create this narrative about upcycled textiles on Facebook. So I started a little project, and then because I got kicked out of so many of the other textile groups, I started one of my own where I would be allowed to talk about my little project freely.
Yeah.
And it grew virally. But very, very quickly in the game, I realized that the viral audience that had come to have this conversation was, number one, not that interested in my little project. Number two, they were way more interested in talking about their own things. And what I learned, like along the way, about 20,000 members in, is that Facebook does not recognize the difference between positive and negative engagement. Mm-hmm. And we had so much conflict in our group, it was actually driving our growth in a weird kind of way.
Yeah. Wow.
And so here I was with this online community where I was hoping to become known as an international teacher, where I was hoping to get international teaching gigs. And instead, I found myself as a community manager with a community that was melting down, that had a very toxic culture, and that I didn't enjoy visiting myself anymore. Yeah. And at this point, I then had to make the unexpected pivot into community management, because if I didn't learn to do it well, they were going to eat me alive.
Yeah. Or just go away, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Whew.
Yes. I was ready to pack it in.
Yeah.
So then I went through the Meta certification to become a Meta certified community manager. My certification has now lapsed, I must confess. So the certification only lasts 2 years and you have to renew it. And unfortunately, I was participating in the Facebook Accelerator program, which was so intense that my certification doing it again coincided with that, and there was just no bandwidth. So I can probably also talk about biting off more than you can chew. And so here I am during the Facebook Community Accelerator program. Meta very, very kindly gave me a grant of $40,000, which I then used to reinvest into the community. We made a whole bunch of video in South Africa where we told stories about how upcycled textiles are working towards social good and social change. So we made 100 videos that talk about that story. And then we also launched a magazine and an online course and a website, obviously, to house all of that. With the grant that we received. And here we are 2-3 years later with a very stable community, a wholesome culture, a culture of kindness and encouragement, and all these extra add-ons that we now use. So the magazine is essentially a way to showcase the work of our members. Most of our members who participate get a real kick out of it. They're like, oh my goodness, I've been asked to participate in this thing. And also it's allowing us to put the best of those projects on a particular topic into one edition. So we're creating reference works that people can then refer back to. You know, if somebody comes along and they want to learn particularly about denim, we can say to them, okay, go to this edition of the magazine and you can find all of your examples there. So and what's interesting about that final pivot is halfway through my process with Cloth Collective, actually not even halfway through, 2 years in, I ran into a place where I could no longer hold two stories, because here I had these craft kits that I was selling that were packaged in plastic. And I was telling people they needed to reduce their fiber footprint. So at a point, I let go of my physical product altogether and I made a pivot into digital product completely, which was also quite frightening.
Yeah.
Because there was a revenue gap that I had to get through before the new revenue caught up with the old revenue.
Right.
And that was also pretty scary. But I'm through the worst of it now, and all the systems are up and running, and it's very, very exciting to see all the lights on in the business and everything working.
Well, Melanie, I know Brooke and Holly both have things to say about community and pivots and all the things. So I'm going to invite them to unmute and join this conversation and see where we go from here.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing so much. I say I'm a community builder and somebody that advances equity and is really conscious about mission, and who I work with are mission-driven practitioners and all of that. So all of your story just spoke to my heart. I'm like, yes. And I have 5 groups with over 50,000 people, and I know it's no easy feat to create. And so my passion work is creating non-toxic communities, helping people cultivate that. And so I'm interested in learning more about, and this is maybe more personal because it's what I do, but how did you get involved with Facebook, them teaching you? Like everything I've had to learn, I've had to do it on my own. What did that process look like? I'm super curious.
Okay, so a couple of years ago when Facebook began developing their Blueprint Community Managers course, they identified high impact community managers on Facebook and invited us to engage and help them to co-create the course. So for a period of time, Meta had a group on Facebook where we had direct contact with Meta staff members and direct training from them. And to this day, if you sign up for their community managers exam, you will have access to the founding community managers who have been instrumental in developing that course. So I'm still friends with those community managers. I'm still in their groups, and they're updating the course all of the time. So the reason we're asked to update our certification is because they're updating the information all the time in real time. Community management is changing as fast as the internet is. So that course needs to reflect the landscape as it is today and not as it was 2 years ago. And so the course developers are always updating the course, and the community managers who are qualified always need to update their qualification so that qualification is a reflection of a real-time skill and not something that's already outdated. So I was very privileged. I was one of the first 1,000 people to be invited to join that group, which eventually, I think today it's got about 15 or 18,000 people in it. But I was one of the very, very first community managers to join in, and for a time we had access to meta coaches and meta guides when I did the community accelerator program that I obviously applied for, and when I was doing that, I also had contact with meta coaches and guides, and that I actually found out about because, again, in that window, Facebook used to have a group specifically for community managers who were based in sub-Saharan Africa, so that we could support each other with learning and best practices, and this is what's working for us, what's working for you. And also, interestingly enough, during that time, they were also asking us for feedback around tools and things. So I don't know if you've seen that we've now got the ability to create an automated message on a rolling repeat in some of the groups. There was actually a request that I made. It was a feature that I asked for. And somewhere along the line, it was useful enough and it got rolled out, which was also very magical for me to be a part of that process.
I love that. I think it is so important. Looks like we lost Holly's camera for a second. I think it's so important for people to know things like that exist, right? And to understand that. Brooke, you want to chime in here?
Yes, I'm in awe. I'm still stuck at when you very, very first started the podcast and you talked about the clothes coming up and you looked and you said, we have a problem, folks, for my continent. And how do I create a solution? And my heart is still there. Like that right there is like, that's how we show up in the world, how you've shown up in the world. And so to say, there is a problem and I can do something about it. And you've not just done something about it. You've created a ripple effect and impact all across now that even the US are doing some of the things you've been talking about. So, and it took someone brave enough to say, this is a problem and I want to be a part of the solution. And I salute you for that. And it moves me. I teared up when you were talking about that. And I'm glad to know you and be a part of this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. It's been such an interesting journey.
Well, it is an interesting journey, and there's so much in it for all of us to learn. And the thing that keeps coming up for me from the whole story is, what do you think it was? What subconscious thought were you operating from? What was your operating system telling you that made you say, I can just pivot and do that. I can just pivot and do that. I can just, like those moments you described when you had that bold statement that the people around you were like, what now? Right? So those moments, what was it that carried you over the threshold from having the thought to doing the thing?
Pure desperation. I had been on a track and it wasn't working, and I was ignoring what wasn't working for too long, and eventually I couldn't ignore it anymore, and then I had to make another plan because we've got to pay bills and also if we know it's not working, I think one of the toughest things for me in life, so that's not an easy step. It's a very hard one. I know in the narrative I made it sound easy, but it wasn't. It's normally that point where I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I want to give up. Is there a way out? Can I get a job?
Yeah.
And I know when I'm feeling like that, then something in the business model has to change.
Right. And so many people get to that point and go get the job. Get to that point and just give up, right? From an entrepreneurial standpoint, right? So many people get to that point, and there's something, I think, in those of us who never get to that point and make the choice of go get a job. And it is a thing that is it's the thought that carries us past those moments of choice into continuing the entrepreneurial journey. And it's you said, so one major motivation can be, absolutely the point, something has to change, but there's something more, because the something that has to change went new business thing instead of I'm just going to go get a job, right, to pay the bills.
I think maybe it's because I haven't been employed my entire adult life.
Yeah.
And although having said that, once I'd qualified as a community manager, for a while, I shifted my focus and I was like, okay, so is this something I should be pursuing permanently? And I did try to get a few jobs, and I got a couple of contracts. I got a couple of contracts actually working for Meta during their community summit. A couple of years ago, I ran training rooms during their community summit. So I managed to get a couple of contracts. And then I discovered that I actually hated them because I'm so used to being autonomous.
Yeah. Everyone in this room can relate. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's there's so many things. I also I'm thinking about the young woman, because this happened when you were still a very young woman, I think, driving around the country of South Africa 20 times when everybody was going, oh, you can't do that, that's not safe. I just love the determination and the choice to follow your mission and follow what you knew was yours in the moment to do, over and over and over again. That's just such a huge lesson for all of us, that when we do that, amazing things are possible. So not only, just to be clear, because you have not been dropping numbers the way you could, I want you to tell everybody, how many Facebook groups are there? How many sub communities of the Upcycled Cloth group are there? Because there's several. I'm in more than one for sure.
Yes. So the group creation became a bit of a game for me, like a big experiment. So I have 200 Facebook groups, and they range from anything between 5 members to 240,000. I've even got one that's got 150,000 members in that I've archived because it was growing faster than I could manage, and I didn't have the manpower. To deal with it.
Yeah.
So I've experimented with a lot of groups. The Cloth Collective has got about 150 of those groups in a related family. So when I discovered that, for example, members want to talk about denim specifically, so it made sense to have a group where we could put all the denim projects. I've got one called Volunteer Connect, where I'm attempting to connect volunteers from social causes with organizations that need them, but all around the sewing space. But again, it's one of my little groups that's not doing very much, because obviously energy flows where the attention goes. And most of my attention is focused on the big 240,000 member group, because I've got a fully functioning admin team that sits behind that. That I work with a lot of the time, and I spend a lot of time with them. They're volunteers. They need you to invest in them if they're going to support the work. So I spend a lot of time training my volunteers and just getting them. And I mean, it's amazing. I still find it so surreal I have a community with 240,000 members in that has volunteers looking after it when I sleep. And I sleep really well.
Yeah.
I don't think about what's happening when I'm not there, because my team is so well trained, so dedicated, so aligned with what we're doing. It's been a real privilege to work with them, and that for me was also very interesting. So I grew up believing that I couldn't manage teams. I had that limiting belief in my head: you cannot manage a team. I think it had to do with the way I grew up. I couldn't manage my siblings. So I believed I was terrible at it. But when I started to manage people in a business setting, I discovered that I had this untapped skill that I didn't know I had, and that I'm actually quite good at it.
Yeah.
Which was also very, very surprising for me.
That's so wonderful. Well, we're running up on time for sure. And I want to just say, people heard, Melanie, that you're from South Africa, that this all started with a mission around the situation of textile waste in South Africa. But, Melanie, one of the small groups, several of the Facebook groups, are geographically specific. So I'm a member of an Upcycled Cloth group for the Southeastern United States, which means I'm likely to meet other people that care about this work that live near me, and I could actually get together with them and meet them and, do things. And it's such a wonderful way to connect people around that. So I just want to encourage Melanie, tell everybody quickly where they can find you and all of this wonderful work. What's the best place for them to go?
So the best place to go would be the Facebook group. So just go into Facebook and type in Upcycled Cloth Collective. You can also visit our website. It's upcycledclothcollective.com. And there you'll find QR codes to reach the group in Facebook, and you'll find the magazine and the online course and all the other extra things on there also.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I know people are going to want to do that exact thing. And it's such an honor to have you with us. Holly and Brooke, you want to say anything in closing?
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure, ladies. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to tell my story. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Wise Women Collective show.
We trust you're leaving inspired, empowered, and ready to make a difference. Keep the momentum going. Join our Wise Women Collective community at wisewomencollectivehq.com.
Connect with other women, amplify your power, and together we'll continue to rise. Until next time, stay strong and connected, because when women rise, the world follows.